Ryan's office revenge. The moment Ryan Hoffman told me to sign that document or clean out my desk, I knew this Harvard kid had just made the biggest mistake of his career. You know what really got me? The smirk on his face, like he was doing me some kind of favor. The conference room went dead quiet. You could hear the air conditioning humming and somebody's coffee maker gurgling down the hall. My name's Patrick Sullivan. I'm 47, been building things since I got out of the Navy 20 years ago. Started in Norfolk Shipyard, worked through 3 manufacturing companies before landing at North Star Defense Systems 15 years back. Here's the thing. I wasn't just some guy turning wrenches. I had 2 engineering degrees and enough experience to know when someone was trying to screw me over. The last 3 years, I'd been developing manufacturing processes that could cut production costs on defense contracts by 30%. We're talking about patents worth $12 million. Real money. And this 28-year-old nephew of the CEO wanted me to sign them over to streamline company operations. Yeah, right. The document sat there on the conference table like a loaded gun. I'd seen enough corporate paperwork in my time to know this wasn't standard procedure. My contract was crystal clear about intellectual property. I'd made sure of that when I started here. This is how we modernize operations in the new economy, Ryan said, adjusting his tie like he was playing dress-up in his uncle's office. All intellectual property created on company time belongs to North Star. We're consolidating ownership under executive oversight to move faster. I looked around the table. My supervisor, Janet, was staring at her hands like she was reading tea leaves. The HR rep hadn't even shown up. Should have been my first red flag. Just me, Ryan, and a couple of his MBA buddies who probably couldn't tell a drill press from a coffee machine. That's not what my contract says, I told him straight. I negotiated specific language about IP ownership when I started here. Spent 2 weeks going back and forth with your legal department. Ryan's smile got tighter. You could practically see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how some old factory guy knew about contract law. Contracts can be updated, Patrick. We're moving fast in the competitive landscape. Sometimes you have to adapt or get left behind. Not retroactively, they can't. Not without legal review and mutual agreement. He leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, which, technically, his uncle did. Patrick, let's be realistic here. You're not getting any younger. The industry's changing rapidly. Wouldn't it be easier to just go with the flow and let the next generation handle strategic decisions? That's when I knew this wasn't about streamlining operations or moving fast or any of that MBA nonsense. This was about a young hotshot trying to prove himself by taking credit for someone else's work. The kind of thing that happened too often. These days, some kid with a business degree thinking he could just download 20 years of manufacturing knowledge from LinkedIn. See, here's what Ryan didn't understand. I had 2 kids in college. My daughter Sarah finishing nursing at Ohio State. My son Mike studying mechanical engineering at UC. Between them, I was looking at $80,000 in tuition over the next 2 years. My pension was tied to staying at North Star until 55. Walking away now would cost me $200,000 in retirement benefits. But those patents? They represented something bigger than money. 3 years of getting up at 5 a.m., staying late to run tests, solving problems that had stumped engineers with twice my education. I'd redesigned assembly processes from the ground up, figured out how to reduce metal fatigue and high-stress components, eliminated bottlenecks that had been costing the company millions in delays. I need to review this with my attorney, I said, keeping my voice level. Ryan actually laughed, not nervous, but amused. Like I'd told him I needed to consult my horoscope. You don't need an attorney for internal paperwork, Patrick. This is just administrative cleanup to bring everything under proper corporate structure. Just sign it, and we can all move on with our lives. I stood up slowly. The way you do when you're about to cross a line you can't uncross. 20 years in the military teaches you to recognize that moment. I'm not signing anything without legal review. That's final. Ryan's face changed. The fake friendliness disappeared, replaced by something cold and entitled. Then you're fired. Effective immediately. Just like that. No HR process, no written warning, no documentation. 15 years of loyalty, coming in early when production lines went down, staying late to troubleshoot equipment problems, training younger engineers, saving the company millions. And he cut me loose in front of witnesses because I wouldn't hand over my life's work. The room went so quiet, you could hear people breathing. One of his MBA buddies shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Janet finally looked up from her hands, eyes wide with shock. "You sure about that?" I asked. "You want to think carefully about what just happened here." "I'm sure," Ryan said, gesturing toward the door like I'd overstayed my welcome at a dinner party. "Security will escort you out." I walked out knowing two things. Ryan Hoffman had just terminated me without cause, and he'd done it in front of witnesses. In the Navy, we had a saying, "Document everything, trust nothing." That training was about to save my career. You know what the kicker was? My badge still worked. Ryan was so busy playing big shot, he forgot to call security. I walked right past the turnstiles. Kid thought firing someone was like deleting an email. Push a button, and it's gone. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I sat in my F-150 in the parking lot, hands shaking. Not from fear, but from pure anger. 27 years old when I left the Navy, full of hope about civilian life. Now at 47, watching some entitled brat try to steal my life's work. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here's what really burned. Those patents weren't just technical drawings. They represented every 5 a.m. morning in the shop, every weekend I'd given up to solve production problems. That was my engineering. My experience turned into something valuable. I called Michael Rodriguez. Met him through the Machinists' Union 5 years back. Good guy who understood blue-collar workers getting screwed by corporate types. "Patrick, what's going on?" Miguel's voice sounded concerned. I could hear office noise in the background. Phones ringing, people talking. Normal business day for everyone else. "They fired me, Miguel. Kid did it right in a conference room. No HR, no documentation, no nothing." "Slow down. Who fired you? What happened?" I took a breath and walked him through the whole thing. The document Ryan wanted me to sign, my refusal to give up my patent rights, the termination without cause. Miguel listened without interrupting, and I could practically hear him taking notes. "Let me get this straight," he said when I finished. "Ryan Hoffman, the CEO's nephew, demanded you sign over your intellectual property rights, and when you refused, he fired you on the spot? In front of witnesses?" "That's exactly what happened." "Did they follow any termination procedures? Progressive discipline, written warnings, chair involvement? What procedures?" The kid just pointed at the door like I was some drunk who wandered into the wrong building. Miguel was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had that lawyer tone, sharp, focused. "Patrick, this is big, really big. How valuable are we talking about with these patents? $12 million conservatively. Manufacturing processes that cut production costs by 30%, reduce waste by 40%. Took me 3 years to develop, and they're the foundation for about half our defense contracts. Crap. I heard papers shuffling on his end. "Patrick, I need to see your original employment contract right now. If what you're telling me is accurate, they just violated about 6 different labor laws. How soon can we meet? Get down here now. And Patrick, don't talk to anyone from North Star. If they call, refer them to me." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Miguel's office above Murphy's Diner in downtown Columbus. Small place, but Miguel had a reputation for taking on big companies and winning. His waiting room had photos of factory workers, union meetings, guys like me who'd gotten screwed and fought back. We spent the next 2 hours going through my paperwork. Miguel read every line of my employment contract twice, making notes in the margins, occasionally muttering something in Spanish that probably wasn't complimentary to Ryan Hoffman. "Here's the thing," Miguel said, spreading the contract pages across his desk. "Your contract has very specific language about intellectual property. The company can use your innovations for internal operations, but ownership stays with you unless they follow proper procedures." "What kind of procedures?" "Legal review, fair compensation, proper documentation, and most importantly, mutual agreement. They can't just demand you sign away your rights, and they definitely can't fire you for refusing." I felt something loosen in my chest. "So what do? We file a wrongful termination claim and send them a cease and desist order. If they try to use your processes without authorization, it becomes theft of intellectual property. Federal crime, not just a civil violation." Miguel pulled out a yellow legal pad and started writing. "Here's what's going to happen. First, we document everything: the meeting, the witnesses, the improper termination. Second, we send them legal notice that they have 5 days to stop using any of your processes. Third, we file with the labor board. And if they ignore us?" Miguel smiled, and for first time since that conference room, I felt hopeful. They won't ignore us once they understand what they're facing. "Patrick, they just fired their most valuable engineer without cause in an attempt to steal intellectual property worth 8 figures. This isn't some minor HR dispute. This is corporate theft." My phone rang. The caller ID showed Nicholas Hoffman, Ryan's uncle, and the CEO. I showed Miguel the screen. "Don't answer," he said quickly. "Let it go to voicemail." We listened to the message together. Nicholas Hoffman's voice was friendly, conciliatory. "Patrick, there's been a misunderstanding. Ryan's new to management, got a little overzealous with company policy. How about we sit down Monday morning and work this out like professionals? Give me a call." Miguel was already shaking his head. "Classic damage control. They're realizing what just happened. Should I call him back?" "Absolutely not. They fired you, Patrick. They don't get to walk that back with a friendly phone call." Miguel stood up and grabbed his jacket. "I'm filing the paperwork today. By Monday morning, they'll have legal documents on their desk instead of friendly conversations." I walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in years, like someone was finally on my side. Ryan Hoffman thought he could push around some old factory guy who wouldn't know his rights. Wrong bet, kid. The war was just beginning. Monday morning came fast. Miguel wasn't kidding about moving quickly. By 8 a.m., he'd filed our wrongful termination claim and hand-delivered a cease and desist order to North Star's legal department. 6 pages, single-spaced, referencing about 20 federal statutes. Beautiful legal work. I was home drinking coffee when my phone started buzzing with text messages. First one came from Janet, my old supervisor. They're asking everyone who was in that meeting to write statements. Legal's going crazy. Then another from Tim in production. "Heard you lawyered up. Good for you, man. Here's the thing about factory workers. We talk. Word spreads faster than gossip at church." By lunch break, everyone at North Star knew exactly what happened in that conference room. Around noon, my phone rang. Nicholas Hoffman again. "Patrick, we need to talk. This legal action is unnecessary. We can work this out. Mr. Hoffman, my attorney told you all communication goes through him now. This is getting blown out of proportion. Ryan made a mistake, but we can fix it. Come back with a raise, better title, whatever you want." I set my coffee cup down real careful. "Sir, your nephew didn't make a mistake. He fired me for refusing to sign away my intellectual property. That was a choice. We'll give you a promotion. Senior principal engineer, how's that sound?" "I already have a title, Mr. Hoffman. I earned it by doing good work for 15 years. Your nephew decided that wasn't worth anything. Patrick, please, think about your future. Starting over at 47, that's risky in this economy." "You know what's risky? Letting someone steal $12 million worth of patents because they think they can push around a factory worker." I could hear papers shuffling. Maybe someone coaching him in the background. Probably their lawyer telling him to shut up before he made things worse. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "Nothing from you. I'm already talking to Allied Manufacturing about bringing my processes there." Long pause. Real long. Allied was North Star's biggest competitor for defense contracts. If they got my manufacturing innovations, North Star would lose millions in Pentagon bids. Those military contracts don't exactly grow on trees. "Let's not be hasty, Patrick. I wasn't hasty, sir. I spent 15 years being loyal to a company that let your nephew fire me in a conference room. The hasty one was Ryan when he decided my patents looked better with his name on them. I hung up and immediately called Allied Manufacturing. Word travels fast. Defense industry, especially when someone gets wrongfully terminated over patents worth 8 figures. Jessica Parker, their CEO, took my call personally. "I heard about what happened at North Star," she said. Professional voice, but I could hear the interest. Ryan Hoffman's making quite a name for himself in the industry. Not the good kind of name, I'm guessing. Let's just say his reputation for people skills is spreading. I'm curious, those manufacturing processes you developed, how adaptable are they? Completely scalable. Could cut your production costs by 30%, maybe more depending on your current setup. When can you start? Soon as my legal situation gets resolved. Should be a few months at most. We'll be here when you're ready. Patrick, companies like North Star think employees are disposable. We think good engineers are investments. Meanwhile, Miguel was getting reports from inside North Star that made my blood boil. Ryan had called an all-hands meeting telling everyone to ignore the frivolous, legal threats from a disgruntled ex-employee. He told the production team to keep running my processes, just change the documentation names. Kid thinks renaming a patented process makes it legal, Miguel told me over the phone. Like stealing a car and calling it a truck. Can he do that? Absolutely not. Changing names doesn't change origin, it's still your intellectual property, and using it without authorization is federal theft. That afternoon, Miguel filed an emergency injunction. Federal court, not state. When you're dealing with defense contracts and intellectual property theft, the feds take it seriously, real seriously. The injunction hit North Star like a freight train. 3 production lines shut down immediately. $12 million worth of defense contracts suddenly couldn't be fulfilled on schedule. The Pentagon started asking uncomfortable questions about delivery delays on critical military equipment. My phone lit up with messages from guys still working there. "They're panicking," Tim texted. "Management's running around like chickens with their heads cut off." Another message from Janet. "Ryan's blaming you for sabotaging the company." Legal told him to stop talking. Here's what Ryan didn't understand about manufacturing. You can't just swap out core processes like changing tires on a car. Those patents weren't just paperwork. They were the foundation of how North Star built their products. Take them away, and the whole operation falls apart. Nicholas Hoffman called again that evening. This time he wasn't friendly. "You're destroying this company, Patrick. 200 families depend on these jobs." "No, sir. Your nephew destroyed it when he fired the guy who could have prevented all this. We'll fight this in court. We've got resources." "Go ahead." "I've got 15 years of documentation, 3 witnesses to an improper termination, and contracts that clearly protect my IP rights. You've got a Harvard MBA who thought he could steal someone's life's work in a conference room. This could get expensive for everyone. It already has. Difference is, I didn't start this fight." After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about those 200 families he'd mentioned. Good people who showed up every day, did their jobs, trusted the company to make smart decisions. They didn't deserve to suffer because some entitled kid couldn't control his ego. But here's the thing about consequences. They don't care about who deserves what. Ryan Hoffman had made a choice in that conference room, and now everyone was going to live with the results. The next few weeks were going to get quite very interesting indeed. The court case lasted 6 months, but it was over before it really started. North Star hired one of those big Chicago law firms. Guys in $3,000 suits who charged more per hour than I used to make in a week. They tried everything you'd expect, claiming my innovations were obvious improvements that any competent engineer could have. Developed, arguing that company equipment somehow gave them ownership rights, even suggesting I was just a wrench turner who couldn't have created anything valuable. That last argument really ticked me off. Miguel had warned me they'd try to diminish my qualifications, make me sound like some high school dropout who got lucky. But I had Navy electronics training, 2 engineering degrees, and 20 years of hands-on manufacturing experience solving problems these lawyers couldn't even pronounce. Miguel destroyed every argument they made. He brought in Brian Walsh, a 30-year veteran machinist from our shop floor, who testified about the complexity of my processes. Brian explained to Judge Williams how my innovations solved problems that had stumped engineers for years, reducing metal fatigue in high-stress components, eliminating bottlenecks in assembly lines, cutting waste without sacrificing quality. Patrick didn't just improve existing processes, Brian told the court. He redesigned them from the ground up, took problems nobody else could solve, and found solutions that saved the company millions. The judge wasn't impressed with North Star's case. Judge Williams was an older guy who'd worked his way through law school at night while running a machine shop. He understood the difference between management theory and practical engineering. It appears that Mr. Hoffman terminated a valuable employee in an attempt to acquire intellectual property without following proper procedures or providing compensation, Judge Williams said during closing arguments. The defendant company seems to believe that signing a paycheck grants ownership of an employee's creativity and expertise. This is not how employment law works in America. Here's what really sealed it. Miguel had gotten hold of an internal email from Ryan to his uncle, sent the day after he fired me. "Don't worry about the old guy," it read. "We'll just say the patents were company property all along. Who's going to believe some factory worker over us?" That email got read aloud in court. You could see the jury's faces change when they heard it. Ryan sitting there in his expensive suit, realizing his own words had just sunk him. North Star had to pay me $850,000 in damages. Wrongful termination, lost wages, legal fees, punitive damages, and compensation for attempted IP theft. More importantly, they lost the right to use my processes entirely. Every production line that depended on my innovations had to be shut down or redesigned from scratch. Ryan Hoffman lasted exactly 8 more weeks before the board removed him. Word was that Uncle Nicholas wasn't too happy about losing $12 million worth of contracts because his nephew couldn't control his ego. Ryan's last day was quite a scene. Security escort to the parking lot, just like they'd done to hourly workers for years. Allied Manufacturing hired me the day my settlement cleared. Senior consulting engineer with a 5-year contract, full patent protection, and a salary that reflected my actual value. My first project was adapting my processes for their new defense contracts, the same ones North Star couldn't bid on anymore because they'd lost their manufacturing advantage. You know what felt best? The respect. Jessica Parker listens when I talk. When I suggest improvements, she asks questions instead of assuming she knows better. "Your experience is exactly what we need," she told me on my first day. "We want innovation from people who actually understand how things get built." My kids are proud of what I did. Sarah called it standing up to corporate bullies. Mike said I showed him that principles matter more than paychecks. That meant more to me than any settlement money. I drive past the old North Star facility sometimes on my way to Allied. The parking lot's half empty now. They laid off 180 people after losing those Pentagon contracts. Could have been avoided if they'd treated their employees like people, instead of disposable assets to be managed by whoever had the right family connections. My daughter graduated nursing school debt-free thanks to that settlement. My son's got 2 more years of engineering school paid for. My pension's secure now, and I don't have to worry about working until I'm 70. Not bad for a factory worker who supposedly couldn't create anything valuable. These days I sleep better knowing I stood up for myself when it mattered. You spend 20 years building expertise, solving problems that keep America's military equipment running, making things work better for everyone who depends on what you build. Some entitled kid with the right last name figures he can just take credit for all that knowledge and effort because he's got an MBA and you've got calluses on your hands. Wrong move, kid. Here's what I learned about standing up to people who think they can push you around. Most of them have never faced real consequences for their actions. They're used to getting their way through connections, intimidation, or just plain entitlement. But when someone finally pushes back, really pushes back, with documentation and legal backing and the determination to see it through, they fold faster than a house of cards. The thing about bullies, whether they're in elementary school or executive suites, is they count on you backing down. They count on you being too scared, too poor, too tired to fight back. They count on you believing that little guys can't win against big companies. Sometimes they're wrong about that. Sometimes the little guy knows his rights, documents everything, and finds himself a lawyer who understands that David can still beat Goliath. You just need the right stones and the courage to use them. And sometimes, American justice actually works exactly the way it's supposed to.